Hey everyone, my name is Eva Balikova and I am the owner and co-founder of Booming Beets Kitchen. And you can see that I'm in my sweatpants and I'm at home. I'm not at the restaurant. That's because it's Monday and we're closed. So today I was kind of spending most of the day just thinking about where the restaurant is headed, what we want, and what we have been through, and kind of just creating and setting up strategy. And I decided, oh, maybe I should share what we're up to with our customers. And then I thought, that's not a great idea because nobody does that, right? Like, how many business owners tell you what's going on behind the scenes and what they're thinking, where this is headed? And I could never figure out why there's all this secrecy in businesses about what's going on. And there's a lot of NDAs and nobody can share. And I always thought, like, we used to share recipes with customers. We stopped because we just stopped reprinting them. No other reason than that. But I always thought, like, okay, I want to share what I know. I want to share what we have learned. I want to share with our customers, how do we cook this stuff? Because then they can go and make it at home. And our whole mission is not to sell you more food. Our whole mission is to make you healthier. So I thought, hey, I'm going to share what we're planning. And I don't know what good could come out of it. It might not be entirely orthodox or appropriate and whatnot, but I just want to share with you what we've been through. And then again, I guess if I think about it, a lot of the things that we do are not very standard industry things, right? So I guess I could share with you some of those things that we do very, very different with that other restaurants don't do. So first of all, I don't know if you noticed, but we have people who are cross-trained, and sometimes you'll see them working in the kitchen and sometimes you'll see them work in front of a house. And people are like, well, why do you do that? Like, don't you just want to have some people who are very, very good at serving and really, really good at cooking? And my whole thing was when I have very, very limited experience working in the restaurant industry. But the short time I did when I was in my early 20s, the one thing that kind of drove me crazy was the disconnect between the kitchen staff and the service staff. There was always this us versus them and people not really getting each other. And it was like two different restaurants. It's like two different units. And I didn't want that. I wanted to create a place where people would be more of a family. They could always help each other out. If one side gets slammed, you can just jump them and help them. And the other reason was our food is sometimes a little bit complicated. And it's not that our food is complicated. Sometimes, I want to say the customers are complicated, but that sounds really mean. But yeah, some of the requests that we get from customers are very, very complicated because you guys sometimes suffer from a whole bunch of different stuff, and you need. We don't just have customers who are paleo or who are autoimmune protocol. We have customers that have other restrictions. And you will see the difference when you have a server that has worked in the kitchen or that regularly works in the kitchen and you're trying to work out what you're going to eat. And they can just tell you, okay, this is how this is made and this is what's in this. And it's like this fluid conversation where they can make suggestions versus when it's somebody who has not been trained in the kitchen yet. Because we usually start them in front of a house first. Once we know that, they do a really good job, then we start introducing them to the kitchen. So it's that reason, right? That we like to cross-train people. It's not orthodox at all, and I know very few restaurants that do that. Actually, I don't know. I might know of a couple, but most restaurants definitely don't do that. Usually you have the servers wanting to be servers and the cooks wanting to be cooks. And no, I really, really, really love what we have. The other thing that is, different about a restaurant is like obviously the menu that we serve. And, and I'm sharing this with you, like all this business stuff. It's like, because I'm so grateful. You guys have supported us from day one. And yesterday I saw a couple that came for Mother's Day. I saw a couple that came to the restaurant. They was there for the opening in 2014. In May 2014 they came. It's 4 years ago and they're still coming, and I was so grateful. They didn't make a reservation. I'm like, okay, well, we'll make room for you guys because we just love you so much. And it was just, and it's like people who have supported us, even though the odds were literally stacked up against us. When I think about it, when I was thinking about opening the restaurant, right? Like, I had no restaurant experience. I think the biggest odd against us was like, okay, who's running the show? And that was me. And when I look back at it, I worked a couple summers at a restaurant in Cedar Point, which is an amusement park in Ohio. An amusement park. It's like that in no way prepares you for what came after we open. Much less opening a paleo restaurant. I could not find a paleo chef to open. So we opened and we're like, oh my goodness. Like, we had a chef, but she was a vegetarian. And it was like, okay, well, that doesn't work. And so we started creating dishes, and a lot of the menu that first came was out of my head. And it was like, okay, well, I don't know how to even cook. I mean, I could cook some stuff, but I was no way a chef. So it's like, but I was determined to open a restaurant that would really make a difference in the community, where all the ingredients would, like, there would be like nothing that is bad for you. So I was like, okay, well, we'll figure it out. So Sam and I would go and eat and, just get inspired and watch YouTube videos, and then watch Gordon Ramsay and be like, okay, can we make this paleo? Can we paleoify this in some way? And keep getting inspiration that way. And then we would, of course, be going through the blogs of the paleo bloggers out there, and then we would cook stuff that it would usually not taste good, especially the early paleo. What was in the market was like really not great. So it was like really, really interesting beginnings. And when we first opened, I knew nothing about systems, right? I didn't know you were supposed to have closing lists and opening lists, and we didn't have service station. If you guys have worked in the industry, you can just imagine. If you have ever worked as a server, you can just imagine what kind of mess it was. So those were like, me running the restaurant, that was like one of the biggest odds stacked against us. The other thing was running a restaurant in Boulder, which I don't know if you know how it works in the restaurant industry, but I think the statistics are that half the restaurant goes out of business in the first year, and the rest in another 40% in the next 2 or 3 years. So and in Boulder it's like especially challenging environment, just because the real estate prices and the rent is so high, and you still can't be overpriced and things like that. So that was interesting and really, really challenging. The third thing that was really stacked against us is the food cost. The cost of the food that we provide. And a lot of our customers is like, well, why is your food so expensive? To answer that question, though, I have to step back and say, okay, so usually the cost of the food in a restaurant, it has to be under 30% for the restaurant to stay in business, right? 30% or less. Now, that is if the alcohol sales are a decent percentage, because as you might know, alcohol has very, very high markups. Now, when we opened, I didn't even think about, oh, wait, paleo people don't drink. And that's a great thing. We don't want you to drink. I don't want to be selling a whole bunch of wine to you, right? I just want to provide some wine if you want some that would pair nicely with the food that we provide. And I love wine. I'm okay with it. I'd by no way judge, but that's not my business model. I'm here to make you healthy, not to make you drink. So it was very interesting, like, okay, so we're dealing with food costs, which industry have to be at 30%, and we were at 40% at best. The lowest that we've ever had was about 36%. And then we're on top of that, we're dealing with, oh, wait a minute, that food cost is for restaurants who sell a lot of alcohol. Then we're dealing with, oh, we're not selling a lot of alcohol, and we don't want to sell a lot of alcohol. Our, alcohol sales are like 6% versus a regular restaurant's about 30%, something like that, right? So So it was really interesting realization. And that might be what you're seeing with some other health concepts that they're in town. You might be seeing some of the prices be a little higher, and that is because they might not be selling as much alcohol unless they're on Pearl Street and they get a lot of that crowd. So that was like another thing that was a huge challenge. So, I guess I get a little bit sidetracked, but we're still in business because of you guys, because of those of you who have supported us so long, even through like all the struggles we went through with me not knowing what the heck I was doing. Excuse me. Not knowing how to lead people, not knowing how to teach them what to do. The first batch of people that we hired when we first opened, I couldn't train them because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. So we all were just, running like with our chickens, with our heads cut off. Excuse me. And for the 2 years after that, it took me a while to be like, oh, we need systems, we need processes, we need standardized recipes for everything. It's like all this little stuff that we didn't have when we first started. So it was really interesting. But at the same time, there was not a lot of help that we could have gotten. There was not a lot of rules that we could follow, books that we could read, because there isn't a lot of paleo restaurants. And I read what I could on restaurant management. It just no way prepared me or reflected the kind of restaurant that we were building. So I'm really thankful. We have been in business for over 4 years, and it's because of you guys. And some of you have really supported us through some really funny times where the service was really low and the food was taking an hour to come out and stuff like that. So I'm really thankful and grateful for your support. Now I want to share with you, I was thinking what we really want to create. And I guess, like, before I share that with you, I want to give you a little bit of history of Blooming Beets Kitchen. So I first had the vision. I really wanted to open a bunch more paleo restaurants. And to be perfectly honest, it wasn't so much about wanting there to be paleo restaurants accessible to people. A lot of it was about my ego and wanting to be a restaurant chain owner or whatnot. Right? I was like, well, I'm going to look really good if I open a bunch of restaurants in different states and I look like I'm managing it all. I look like a total badass if I have a restaurant here, restaurant there, and I'm all like doing it effortlessly and it all flows. So it had very little to do with you, the customer, everything to do with me. And it was destined to fail, and it did. I opened a restaurant in Arizona. It didn't last. A lot of mistakes were made. A lot. The biggest one was absolutely the location. And I wish I could blame the market and say, well, it's Arizona. People just don't know about paleo there. It's just the weird market. But it really wasn't. It was my business decisions that I made when I was eager and just impatient to set something up, but I wasn't using critical thinking. We wound up in a location that was 3 times as big as I was able to support with our marketing resources. If I had saved enough money and had put enough resources into the marketing and making sure the community knew what was happening, the result would have been different. But I was impatient and I made some really vital business mistakes. And the other part of it was, that part of my life was really challenging because what I realized was, at that time, I was spending 3 days in Boulder, then I would go 3 days in Arizona, and I hate flying, so I would be a lot of times I'd be driving. It's a 14-hour drive one way. I would go drive 14 hours, spend 3 days in Arizona, and then drive back 14 hours. It was all just very challenging. And on top of that, I'm not just a restaurant owner. I also am a leadership coach, and I am an executive coach for entrepreneurs. So I was doing all that, and training myself how to be